governing the nation and unifying the nation. Meaning that Shennong taught his people to plow, sow, and pick leaves for medicine, especially in the upper reaches and at the estuary of the Third Bien River.
Welcome to another episode, another installment of the podcast series on peaceful souls that NhiLe is producing. A series interviewing artisans in Vietnam. And of course, accompanying me today is Uncle Thu. NhiLe likes. Sit down and have a deeper conversation than just a simple story. This is a piece of wood and we carve it into an image. I want to hear the story of how an artisan can create a work. But first, in today's episode, I want you to get to know Âu Lạc. Why the name Âu Lạc and why? Writing folk verses in wood. I think that was the very first question I asked myself when I stepped through the door. And I think there's nothing better than having the very artisan who created that brand. The person who came up with that story, share it with you directly. So, Uncle Thu, thank you. Thank you. Uncle, first question, Âu Lạc. Why is it Âu Lạc?
Perhaps we have to interweave the name Âu Lạc with the slogan writing folk verses in wood into one, because they can't be separated. When establishing the company, I immediately thought of finding a name that carries the spirit of Vietnam, because it's shaped by the journey of building this career. It had to convey Vietnamese cultural values. It had to run consistently through that source. And that ancient national name Âu Lạc became the most satisfying choice, because it is the story of Âu Khai and Lạc Long Quan, who are the paternal and maternal ancestors of the Vietnamese people, within the span of time of 4,000 years of history. Of course, further back we also have Shennong, and the slogan writing folk verses in wood is because the field that I and the Âu Lạc artisans work in is traditional woodcarving, and the stories of history and culture are conveyed in each traditional woodcarving piece. And it's like something very subconscious. At first it wasn't clear and coherent like that. But I remember a very interesting saying. Art is the expression of the unconscious. And that saying fits Âu Lạc so well, to the point it once even surprised me. After some time, themes and series of works particular to Vietnamese culture were born. For example, the first series was Stories of My Village. That series, Stories of My Village, is a collection of nearly 50 pieces of the fruits and plants of rural Vietnam, all the materials found in the garden, in the village, in the hamlet, that I sketched, redrew, and then rendered in wood, such as gourds, loofah, bitter melon, the sensitive plant, the bap fruit, banana, jackfruit, areca palm, bamboo, and so on. Then from those individual motifs, I grouped them into sets, Because in Vietnamese tradition, as well as Eastern culture, we have sets like the For Gentleman, Plum Blossom, Orchid, Chrysanthemum, or the For Arts, Chin, Chess, Calligraphy, Painting. Then the For Sacred Creatures, Dragon, Kiln, Turtle, Phoenix, and many other tetrads. With these rural materials, I combined them into sets, such as bitter, spicy, sweet, savory, then rural silhouettes, then Flower Lane, which is a set of for panels, featuring flowers, characteristic of village gates and lanes, such as bougainvillea. Then jasmine, and so on. Then the set Forest Fragrance, which has for kinds of fruits from the midland mountainous regions, such as Simrose Myrtle, Dates, Vouvet, Langsat, and sets such as Night Fragrance, featuring flowers that release their scent at night, such as Rangoon Creeper, Night Blooming Jasmine, grouped into sets like that, to fill the gap left by the classical tetrads. And these are bas-relief sets that are tied to the lives of Vietnamese people, especially in the countryside. So those are precisely folk verses, the first folk verses written in wood. And after that, the series Sacred Works, Spirit of Rivers and Mountains was born. That Sacred Works, Spirit of Rivers and Mountains series is a story about the flow of 4,000 years, and how, with a history for 1,000 years long, so interminable, can we turn it into art, into a story, with just 9 pieces. Then its level of abstraction had to reach a very high degree so that everything in that 4,000-year flow could be compressed into the most essential quintessence, so it could be told in 9 works. Thus, the result was 5 ways conveyed within those 9 pieces: founding the nation, preserving the nation, saving the nation, governing the nation, and unifying the nation. Thus, any people with a long history must pass through those 5 ways. In that sense, it achieves a very high abstraction. Then within each of those ways, we had to distill which values are emblematic and how to render them artistically in a fresh way. So I drew on the realm of legend and Vietnamese history to shape it artistically. But if we merely copied the story of Lac Long Quan and Âu Co, then it wouldn't be true art. We must sublimate it. We must discover what is new within it, to raise it to a higher spirit. From legend, we can elevate it to a philosophical level. And the highest level in art is the spiritual Tao aspect. It must touch that. This very series, Sacred Works, Spirit of Rivers and Mountains, is like a folk verse continued. After the rural collection, and after some time, the bas-relief Autumn River, Jade Mountain came into being. This bas-relief was adapted from the novel that I had written not long before. And it is a story that encompasses the essence of this Thurbon River, across the land of Quang Nom and Da Nang, now the city of Kont. And on any given land, there must converge. For values, any region, to a greater or lesser extent, has for values, firstly, those works of ancient architecture, as well as civilization, the civilizational value, among which the value of a written script is emblematic. The second value is the vital spirit of that land, which generates its specialties, natural products, bestowed by heaven and earth upon that region. On this Thurbon River, by good fortune and nature's favour, there are very unique specialties, such that, one could say, no other river in Vietnam possesses such vital spirit, manifested through products of top value in Vietnam. Among them, Ngoc Linh ginseng stands at the world's pinnacle, and a third element is traditional crafts. That very vital spirit of the land produced its specialties and fostered a civilization of urban architecture, of written script, and many other values. Among these, the products, the goods of traditional craft villages, are an expression of the land's vital spirit. Along the Thurbon River, there is a full range of crafts, with uniquely valuable features rarely found elsewhere. And a fourth element is the people of that land. So those are the four values that were incorporated into the bas-relief: Autumn River, Jade Mountain. And it didn't stop there. After creating the work Autumn River, Jade Mountain, which led to creating the bas-relief Autumn River, Jade Mountain, it then revealed a structure, the geomancy and geography of this land that was incredibly unique. And so I had to write another book, The Code of the Sacred Triangle, to decode the configuration of mountains and rivers within a triangular system of this region. There. And so it is. That decoding of the sacred triangle then aligned with the series one had created 10 years earlier. They fit together. And the very code that 10 years ago, now 15 years ago, was embedded within Sacred Works, Spirit of Rivers and Mountains. Exactly 10 years later, I discovered it was the configuration of mountains and rivers, and that was the reason for the birth of the novel, The Code of the Sacred Triangle. And when I wrote the last page of The Code of the Sacred Triangle, a Taiji diagram yin-yang schema of Vietnam's territory burst forth, a Taiji diagram reflecting the later Heaven 8 trigrams in vivid form. Then I realized how many issues of ancient history were in there, and that ancient history is alive within the contemporary era, meaning there is an intimate bond between antiquity and the present. It's like a flow, and it's reaching a certain period to open out. It's like you chose bloom, meaning it blossoms, blooming at the right moment. So I went on to write another book, that is, Shennong and Vietnamese Wisdom, to decode all those bodies of knowledge, insights of a primordial nature, that for so long I seemed unable to find on Google or in research works. If they existed, they were only scattered here and there, and they didn't align, they didn't clarify. They didn't satisfy. Thus, from the rural tales with those early bas-reliefs, through sacred works, spirit of rivers and mountains, to Autumn River, Jade Mountain, to the story of Shennong and the Vietnamese essence, it reflects a 5,000-year history. And it ties back to the slogan, chosen 20 years ago, writing folk verses in wood.
That was wonderful, Uncle, because with just a short line like that to explain, you helped me picture it, like a painting. In the past we composed, with poetry and prose, for example, we would use language, then write it into a poem. But now, for a wood carving artist like you, why is it that we have to write that poem by carving those artworks on wood? And through that tell a story to people who love art or these spiritual values? Then, on the journey where you share the story, as you said about Shennong, about Âu Lạc, about folk verses written in wood, has there been any experience that really impressed you when tourists came or when people who enjoy and love art heard this story from you, and to this day you still find it memorable?
Do you have enough time to listen?
Yes.
Because there's so much.
Yes, there's enough. I'll split it into many episodes.
So each memory could become a story of its own, right?
Right, today we'll start with the first story. Even you yourself have your own story with me, so I know that for everyone who's come, each one has a different story.
There are so many that I don't know which story to begin with.
The most recent one, something recent that impressed you.
Returning to the tale of rural fruits and Vietnamese flora. Well, at first, I drew and carved that subject matter simply because I love it, due to the sense of the design art, so unique. Because for each kind of fruit, creation has given it a form, a design, that always creates an impression that keeps me mulling over it. For example, the bap fruit. It has 3 segments, 3 edges. It has a shape. A shape that isn't round, isn't square either. It has a very distinctive form, and that form makes it, when I draw it, very hard to capture its spirit accurately. And once drawn, for the artisan who wants to render it in wood, it's not easy either. Just a few errant strokes, and it's no longer the bap fruit. Or like we see, the star fruit. It's such a beautiful piece of design. And then, the saursop, the pineapple, the jackfruit. Each fruit has a form, a shape that is very beautiful. At that time, it was simply out of that love, that liking, that I drew. And later, when I discovered and continued on the next steps, I saw, oh, this is all produce, for which Shennong is the very progenitor, who taught people how to use it, bringing it into daily life, forming a source of wholesome nutrition to nourish the Vietnamese people. Our ancient Viet, later the Bok Viet, and up to Vietnamese today, from that very source of nourishment. And one part is nourishment. Another part is that he also taught us the ways to use it for healing, for prevention and for cure. So those first works are in fact connected to the series Shennong and Vietnamese wisdom. It is thus the story that created the Shennong statues, is to me quite an interesting tale. Now, if you go looking for a Shennong statue in Vietnam, there are very few. Shrines to Shennong are everywhere. Near my house there's one too. A Shennong shrine is part of the culture of Vietnamese people of a nation rooted in wet rice, distinctly agricultural. So there are Shennong shrines everywhere, but actual statues of Shennong seem very rare. And upon looking, I found here and there a few Shennong statues in certain temples and shrines, but I wasn't satisfied because the sculpted line, it still carried a generic traditional statue aesthetic. It didn't have a distinctive Vietnamese cultural character. Not that it didn't have any at all, but it didn't immediately convey to modern viewers. One look and you can tell, oh, that's Shennong. So I came up with the idea to choose two design approaches. The first approach was to Vietnamize the statues of the god of wealth and Maitreya Buddha statue that are currently popular on the consumer market. Generally speaking, people really like the look, the shape, plump body, big belly, smiling eyes, a joyful grin. So I Vietnamized that into a Shennong statue by creating a figure of Shennong, then putting a conical hat on him, setting him atop a woven bamboo basket that farmers used to hold rice and other produce, then having him hold a rice ear, a corn cob, a dragon fruit, a guava, a jackfruit, a plum. In this way, we can create a collection of Shennong statues that is very diverse and rich, featuring all Vietnamese farm produce, from vegetables to fruits. All of them can become, or go into, be incorporated together with Shennong to create and, so that, to present the story to everyone. This is Shennong of roots and fruits, vegetables and fruits, and so on. But even then, the Shennong piece still wasn't truly pure Vietnamese because it had been Vietnamized. So we created a purely Vietnamese Shennong, appearing for the first time at Âu Lạc. I created two statues, Shennong, King of Grains, and Shennong, King of Medicine. These are titles that, in ancient law, are conferred upon Shennong, among other titles. But these two are the representative ones. Shennong taught his people to till the fields and to gather leaves for medicine. Tilling the fields yields the King of Grains, hence Shennong, King of Grains. Making medicine yields Shennong, King of Medicine. So what Vietnamese cultural hallmarks are brought into these statues? They must be Shennong with rice hair and a bamboo beard, meaning his hair is a sheaf of rice, because in the past people often tied up or bundled their hair instead of tying it at the back. Now we artisticize it by tying it upwards, because in sculpture it needs to be visible. If tied at the back, then it's hard to recognize. So we tie it upward and it becomes a bundle of rice stalks. And notice that the tied up hair resembles exactly a chisel notch that binds wood joints together, right? Or like a tied bundle of rice stalks, it gathers together and fans out. That is the rice hair. And the beard is? There are 7 in total. 2 bamboo shoots. On top, 3 on the chin. That makes 5. And for 2 eyebrows as to bamboo leaves 7 plus 2 equals 9. So, with 5 below and 2 above, it makes 9. 9 bamboo leaves. And the number 9 is a very special number in the wet rice culture. So, the 2 special traits are rice hair and bamboo beard. Bamboo represents the Vietnamese spirit, and rice is the irreplaceable element in Vietnam's wet rice culture. In addition, he also holds rice grains and corn in his hands. If he were to hold too many other things, it would disturb the composition. But the god of agriculture still radiates an aura, and on this halo are 3 types of produce. They are lotus seeds, sesame seeds, and millet. These together form 5 types of crops, the 5 grains, highly characteristic of Vietnam. For the Medicine King Shennong statue, with rice hair and bamboo beard as well. The precious medicinal herbs of Vietnam. These medicinal herbs are especially concentrated, one could say, particularly at the headwaters and at the river mouth of the Thơ Bon River. So the Medicine King Shennong holds Ngok Lin ginseng root and a swallow. Ngok Lin ginseng is from the headwaters, swallows are from the sea. Those are 2 highly symbolic products, extremely representative. Along with that, there are also agar wood from Tramai, honey, and lingui mushrooms. These are shown on the halo. So, the 2 statues, Medicine King Shennong and Grain King Shennong, became the first works. They can be said to be the first to appear in Âu Lạc. They carried the story, the Vietnamese identity as well as the local identities of the Thơ Bon Jade Mountain region.
What difficulties did you have to overcome when you created works that are so spiritual and highly symbolic? Were there opposing opinions you had to overcome so you could still keep loving the craft and make these products with all your heart, putting your whole heart into the finished pieces for the community?
When speaking of Shennong's philosophy, of course, it is something very ancient, but it has been renewed, yet due to the mindset and habits of our Vietnamese people. People often doubt whether this is really the truth. Is it truly something aligned with the Vietnamese spirit? For example, many say Shennong belongs to China, things like that. So, 2. Help people understand is not easy. To grasp the story thoroughly, we must have depth, and we must have sufficient information, knowledge. So, our job is simply to do it. As for whether people harbor doubts or skepticism, that's their matter.
I really like that. Positivity, because when we make art, if we don't have that positivity, it's hard to put it into the work. What I liked the last time I talked with you was, you explained to me the meaning of the numbers. As you said, 9 is very important in our wet rice culture. Could you explain in more detail why these numbers are special to the wet rice culture, to Vietnamese culture, so young people like me can learn and understand it better in a detailed and thorough way?
For detailed explanations, One must start from far back. And won't you get sleepy?
No, oh my. I want to hear.
So, before going all the way to the very end, let's start from the near, then return to the far. I really like the number 9. That's why in the collection Sacred Essence of Rivers and Mountains, there are 9 pieces. And the number 9 is made up of 3 threes. 3 plus 3 plus 3 equals 9. So in the collection, the first set of 3 is the period of nation founding. There are 3 works: Great Peace, Nation Building, and Vietnamese Women. Moving to historical progress, there are 3 paths. What are they? Nation nurturing, nation saving, and nation governing. 3 works. And in the contemporary era, there are 3 works: the fusion of reason and sentiment, reason plus sentiment. So 3, 3, 3 again makes 9. And within these 3s, each represents heaven, earth, and man. Heaven, earth, man. Heaven, earth, man. 3 times heaven, earth, man equals 9. That's it. So, later I understood that 9 is the ultimate number, the highest. From 1 to 9, 9 is the largest. And wet rice culture favors odd numbers, called Yong numbers: 1, 3, 5, 7, 9. Nomadic culture. The ancestors of the Han people later merged with the ancient Vietnamese to form China. The Han originally they are a nomadic culture, and nomadic culture conquers nature, favoring even numbers: 2, 4, 6, 8. That's why we see these numbers. Recently, people often mention lucky numbers, numbers associated with fortune and wealth. They usually pick numbers that are even, like 68, 88, and so on. Things like that. These are even numbers. But in Vietnamese culture, our ancestors, it became a tradition. Even now, people prefer odd numbers. So, when you look at the place names running along Vietnam's territory, you see patterns like 1 pillar, Tam Da 3 islands, and Guhan 5 elements, that Sun 7 mountains, Kulong 9 dragons.
Yes, that's right. Last time you said that and I went, wow. Our ancestors already knew how to name things like that back then.
Besides that, there are so many beliefs and customs that are formed from odd numbers. For example, Kuhayan, that to 9 generations of ancestors, 7 generations of descendants. Then the 3 powers, the 5 elements, the 7 stars, and so on. If we list the representative cultural values of Vietnam, the roots, the foundation, they show that our ancestors leaned strongly toward odd numbers. Very much so. That is the Yong number. And this relates to why do Vietnamese people love odd numbers? Well, or to be more precise, farmers favor odd, but nomads favor even. It relates to yin-yang and 5 elements. Very ancient structures in our culture, deeply rooted. So it's a long story, very profound, deeply meaningful. Meanwhile, Vietnamese yin-based culture, the wet rice culture, leans inward, toward the inner spiritual life. Childhood is a golden time, a golden period. Of course, we cannot always achieve that, but when we have love, creativity naturally flows.